Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and here's a quick discussion about what is the trade balance. Now, I know as teachers we're always like, don't use Wikipedia and find another source than Wikipedia. But I was looking at Wikipedia and there was quite a useful definition of the balance of trade or the trade balance. It's the same thing. I have done the extraordinarily difficult task of taking something from Wikipedia and putting it on this OneNote document. So if we're thinking about the balance of trade, well, we can just talk about the balance of trade. Okay, that's the same thing as, it's the same thing as the trade balance, right? So, and it's the same for any country. So if you're looking at Australia or America or Japan, it's the same thing. So you can see here that the balance of trade, commercial balance, I haven't really heard in that description. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I've definitely heard the trade balance called net exports. So just to be clear here, so the trade balance, okay, that's the same thing as the balance of trade. That's the same thing as net exports. Sometimes symbolized, or let's change that to an Australian spelling, as net exports, maybe. I like this next bit here, so let's get a little bit of thing. So the trade balance is the difference between the monetary value of a nation's exports and imports over a certain period. Monetary value just being how much it is. So if we're looking at the trade balance, what we're essentially looking at is exports minus imports. So if we're looking at, say, in the Australian context of exports minus imports, what we're talking about is the balance of goods and services. So another way we can describe the trade balance is to look at BOGS in the current account of the balance of payments. Because remember that BOGS looks at the difference between exports and imports for goods and services. But the same deal, the value of exports minus the value of imports. Okay, sometimes the distinction is made between a balance of trade for goods versus one for services. So that's true in Australia's current account, but we also have them put together as the balance of goods and services. Okay, so let's move on to the next part, which I think is pretty useful. Let's get blue. So it says here, if a country exports a greater value than it imports. So before we look at what that means, let's put this into a kind of a few symbols. So let's go down here. Make this arrow go this way. So if a country exports greater than its imports, so exports are greater than imports. So what we're saying is that if exports exceed imports, what we've got is a trade surplus, that the value of exports exceed the value of imports. And you can see here that this is the trade surplus. And conversely, it doesn't refer to the shoes, it just means the opposite. Let's get the blue highlighter again. It says if a country imports a greater value than it exports. So let's do the flip situation and let's do this in blue. So we go here and we're like, okay, so if a country imports greater than it exports, okay, that is a trade deficit or a negative trade balance. Okay, as of 2016, about 60 out of 200 countries have a trade surplus. So you can see the majority is having a trade deficit, not necessarily a bad thing, and we can talk about that another time. All right, final thing to think about, and let's change the pen color. If we've got a situation where exports equal imports, right? So we're not exceeding, we're not in deficit. So basically our trade balance is in balance, right? Our trade balance is in balance. Okay, so this was a very useful little passage that I saw from Wikipedia, and I'll put the link in the description, obviously, but this is the discussion about the trade balance, balance of trade, net exports, all are the same thing. All right, thanks very much for watching.